The desert awakened slowly, reluctantly, as if the earth itself resisted another day of merciless heat. Dawn crept across the Arizona territory in 1880, painting the red rocks in shades of blood and rust. The wind, that eternal wanderer of the Badlands, swept through the arroyos and mesas, carrying with it the scent of sage and the promise of another scorching day. She moved like a shadow among shadows, her bare feet finding purchase on stones that would have torn the boots of any townsman. The Apache girl had no name that men would recognize, no identity beyond the whispered fears of those who glimpsed her from afar. To the wolves who ran beside her, she was simply Pack, their strange two-legged sister who had learned their ways when the world of men had cast her out. The gray wolves moved with her in perfect synchronization, their movements a fluid dance across the hostile landscape. The alpha female, scarred from countless battles for survival, kept close to the girl's side. They communicated in glances, in the subtle shift of shoulders, in the barely perceptible changes of breathing that spoke volumes in their wordless language. The morning light revealed a harsh world stripped bare of comfort. Towering saguaro cacti stood like ancient sentinels, their arms raised in eternal surrender to the unforgiving sky. Prickly pear and cholla dotted the landscape, their thorns gleaming like nature's own barbed wire. The mountains rose in the distance, their peaks shrouded in a gray haze that promised no rain, only the weight of another oppressive day. 5 miles south, in a camp that reeked of unwashed bodies and old blood, 4 men huddled around a dying fire. They were hunters, though not of the sort that any decent folk would claim. Their trade was in pelts and bounties, in whatever the desert would yield to those willing to take it by force. "I'm telling you, I saw her clear as day," Marcus Wheeler insisted, his grizzled face animated with the fervor of a man who'd glimpsed something extraordinary. Moving with them wolves like she was one of them, like some kind of demon. Jake Sullivan spat tobacco juice into the fire, watching it sizzle. "You been drinking that rot gut again, Wheeler. Ain't no such thing as wolf girls." "The Apache's got all sorts of strange ways," offered Thomas Brennan, the youngest of the group at barely 23. "My cousin down in Tucson says they can turn into animals, walk through walls, all manner of unnatural things." The fourth man, Samuel Cray, remained silent. He was cleaning his rifle with methodical precision, his cold eyes focused on the task. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of decision. "Don't matter what she is, the good people of Willow Creek are offering $50 for proof that the wolf attacks stop. If she runs with them, she dies with them." The girl, unaware of the fate being decided over that distant campfire, paused at a small spring hidden among the rocks. The wolves spread out in a protective circle as she knelt to drink. The water was barely a trickle, but it was life itself in this land of death. She cupped it in her hands, remembering dimly another pair of hands, smaller, softer, that had once done the same. The memory fled before she could grasp it, leaving only an ache in her chest that had no name. A rifle shot cracked across the desert, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. The girl's head snapped up, water dripping from her chin. The wolves were already moving, their hackles raised, lips pulled back to reveal gleaming fangs. She rose in one fluid motion, her body tensing for flight. More shots followed, closer now. She could hear the voices of men, harsh and eager, like the baying of hounds on a scent. The girl touched the alpha female's shoulder. A signal, a farewell, a promise. And then she was running. Not with the desperate scramble of prey, but with the calculated speed of a predator choosing its ground. Luke Garrett heard the shooting from 2 miles away. He'd been riding since before dawn, his horse picking its way carefully through the treacherous terrain. At 28, Luke had seen enough of life to know that gunfire in the desert rarely meant anything good. He was what the folks back east might call a wastrel, a man with no fixed address and no particular destination. He'd been a soldier once, then a cowhand, then a dozen other things that hadn't stuck. Now he was just Luke, riding the territory with nothing but his horse, his guns, and a restlessness that wouldn't let him settle. The shooting intensified, and Luke urged his mount toward the sound, not out of any heroic impulse. Heroes, in his experience, mainly got themselves and others killed, but from simple curiosity. In a land where entertainment was scarce, even someone else's trouble could break the monotony. He crested a ridge and saw the scene laid out below him like a morality play written in dust and blood. 4 men were spread out in a rough line, firing at something moving through the rocks. Luke squinted, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Wolves, a pack of them, scattering under the gunfire, but there, moving with them. Mother of God, Luke breathed. It was a woman. No, a girl. Couldn't be more than 20 if she was a day. She moved with the wolves like she'd been born to it, using the terrain for cover, never in one place long enough for the hunters to draw a bead. Her hair was long and wild. Her clothes, what little she wore, were skins and hide. And when she turned briefly in his direction, he caught a glimpse of eyes that belonged to no tame thing. One of the hunters got lucky. His shot caught a wolf, not the girl, thank God, and the animal went down in a spray of red. The girl's cry of anguish carried across the desert, a sound that raised the hair on Luke's neck. It wasn't quite human, wasn't quite animal, but something in between that spoke of loss deeper than words. Luke made his decision without conscious thought. He pulled his rifle from its scabbard and fired into the air. The hunters spun toward the sound, momentarily confused. It was enough. The girl and her remaining pack vanished into a maze of canyons that could hide an army. By the time Luke rode down to where the hunters stood, they were cursing and arguing among themselves. "Who in the hell are you?" Cray demanded, his rifle not quite pointing at Luke but not quite pointing away either. "Name's Luke Garrett," Luke said easily, keeping his hands visible but near his guns. "Heard the shooting, thought maybe you boys needed help." Help?" Wheeler practically screamed. "You just let $50 run off into them rocks." $50. Luke kept his voice mild, though his mind was racing. "That's a lot of money for one wolf." "Weren't just any wolf," Sullivan said. "There's something running with them, something that ain't natural." Luke let his skepticism show. "You boys been out in the sun too long? Starting to see things?" "We saw what we saw," Cray said coldly. "And we'll see it again. That thing's gotta water somewhere, gotta eat. We'll find it." Luke nodded as if in agreement, privately memorizing each of their faces. Men like these were as dangerous as any desert predator, and twice as unpredictable. He made his excuses and rode on, but his mind kept returning to that glimpse of wild eyes, that cry of pain that had seemed to come from the very soul of the desert itself. He'd seen a lot of strange things in his wandering years, but nothing quite like this. As the sun climbed toward its zenith, Luke found himself following the tracks without quite meaning to. Not the obvious ones the hunters would follow, but the subtle signs. A disturbed pebble here, a broken twig there. He'd learned tracking from a Navajo scout during his army days, and the knowledge served him well now. The trail led him deep into a labyrinth of canyons, places where the sun never touched the bottom and the silence was as heavy as a physical weight. He dismounted, leading his horse carefully through passages barely wide enough for them both. And then he saw them, just a glimpse through a gap in the rocks. The girl, tending to the wounded wolf while the others kept watch. She was crooning something, a wordless melody that might have been a lullaby or a death song. Her hands, which had seemed so wild and dangerous before, were infinitely gentle as they cleaned the wound. Luke must have made some sound, some tiny betrayal of his presence, because suddenly those eyes were on him. He froze, acutely aware that he was alone, far from help, facing a pack of wolves and something perhaps even more dangerous, a human who had forgotten how to be human. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other across the divide of species and understanding. Her eyes were dark, almost black, but with gold flecks that caught the filtered sunlight. They held wariness, yes, and fear, but also something else. Curiosity, perhaps, a recognition of something in him that was different from the hunters. Then she bared her teeth, not quite a snarl, not quite a smile, and melted back into the shadows. The wolves followed. leaving Luke standing alone with his heart hammering and the strangest feeling that his life had just taken a turn toward something he couldn't yet name. He made camp that night far from the canyons, but sleep eluded him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those wild eyes looking back at him, challenging everything he thought he knew about the world and his place in it. The town of Willow Creek squatted on the desert like a collection of sun-bleached bones. Luke rode in just as the afternoon heat reached its peak, the main street deserted except for a few dogs seeking shade and a drunk sleeping it off against the wall of Murphy's General Store. Even the flies seemed too exhausted to buzz. The saloon offered the only refuge from the sun, its bat-wing doors promising the relative coolness of shadows and the possibility of conversation. Luke tied his horse to the hitching post and stepped inside, letting his eyes adjust to the dimness. The Lucky Strike saloon had seen better days. The floorboards creaked with every step, and the mirror behind the bar was cracked in 3 places, distorting the reflections of the handful of patrons scattered throughout the room. The bartender, a massive man with arms like ham hocks and a face that suggested he'd been in more than his share of fights, looked up as Luke approached. "Whiskey," Luke said, laying a coin on the scarred wood of the bar. The bartender poured without comment, his eyes already dismissing Luke as just another drifter. Luke took his drink to a corner table where he could watch both the door and the room. Old habits from his army days died hard. "You're that fellow who was out near Canyon Ridge this morning." Luke looked up to find Thomas Brennan standing nearby, his young face flushed with drink and lingering anger. The boy had obviously been nursing his grievances along with his whiskey. "Could be." Luke allowed, "Big territory out there." Brennan pulled out a chair without invitation and sat down heavily. "You cost us a bounty. $50 gone because you had to go playing hero. Didn't know shooting at shadows paid so well these days," Luke said mildly. The younger man's face darkened. "Weren't no shadow. You saw her same as us, that devil woman who runs with the wolves." The saloon had gone quiet. Luke became aware that every ear in the place was tuned to their conversation. He took a slow sip of his whiskey, choosing his words carefully. "I saw a girl," he said finally. "Scared, running for her life. If that makes her a devil, then this territory's got more devils than hell itself." "You don't know nothing about it," Brennan insisted, his voice rising. "She's been plaguing these parts for 2 years now. Cattle gone missing, horses spooked in the night. Bill Morrison swears she watched him from his own barn roof one night, eyes glowing like coals." An older man at the bar turned around. Luke recognized him as Walter Hutchins, who ran the livery stable. "The boy's not entirely wrong. Stranger, there's something unnatural about that creature, living with beasts, acting like one herself. It ain't Christian." "Since when is being different a crime?" Luke asked. "Since it started costing folks money." Another voice chimed in. This was Edgar Phelps, the owner of the largest ranch in the area. He was a thin man with the sharp features of a hawk and eyes just as predatory. "I've lost 6 head of cattle this season. Good stock, too. The town council's voted. That bounty stands until the problem's dealt with." The problem being a half-starved girl trying to survive. Luke kept his tone even, but he could feel anger building in his chest. Phelps stood, his expensive boots clicking on the wooden floor as he approached Luke's table. "The problem, Mr. Garrett. The problem, Mr. Garrett, is anything that threatens the prosperity of this town. We've worked too hard to let some savage undo it all. Apache, isn't she?" This from the bartender, who'd moved closer to listen. "Heard tell there was a family massacred up in the hills couple years back. Army said it was renegades, but could have been settlers didn't take kindly to Indians on their land." "Don't matter what she is," Phelps said coldly. "What matters is what she does. And what she does is run with predators and live like an animal. In my book, that makes her fair game." Luke stood slowly, finishing his whiskey in one swallow. "Interesting book you're reading from, Mr. Phelps. Must be different from the one I know, where it says something about mercy and compassion." He walked out before anyone could respond, but he could feel their eyes following him. He'd marked himself now, shown his hand, In a town this small, word would spread fast that the stranger was soft on their local monster. Luke spent the rest of the afternoon gathering supplies and information at Murphy's store. While buying ammunition and dried goods, he listened to Mrs. Murphy tell her version of the wolf girl story. "Seen her myself, I have," the plump woman insisted, leaning across the counter conspiratorially. "Not 3 months past, I was hanging laundry just after dawn. Looked up and there she was, standing at the edge of town like she was watching us. Gave me such a turn I dropped a whole basket of clean sheets in the dirt." "What did she look like?" Luke asked, feigning casual interest while examining a display of knives. "Wild. Mrs. Murphy said immediately. Hair all matted and tangled, wearing nothing but animal skins. But it was her eyes that got me. They weren't like a person's eyes at all. They were empty, like looking into a well at midnight. Or maybe just frightened," Luke suggested. Mrs. Murphy sniffed. "You men always think you know better. But I'm telling you, that girl's been too long away from civilized folk. Whatever she might have been once, she's something else now." As evening approached, Luke made his way to the edge of town where the desert began its reign. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have made an artist weep. Somewhere out there, a girl who'd forgotten how to be human was watching this same sunset with her pack. He found a flat rock and sat, pulling out his tobacco pouch and rolling a cigarette with practiced ease. The town behind him was lighting lamps against the coming darkness, creating pools of yellow warmth that stood in stark contrast to the vast darkness of the desert. "You're either brave or stupid, sitting out here alone." Luke didn't turn at the voice. He'd heard Sheriff Ben Cooper approaching. The man walked with a slight limp from an old wound, and his spurs had a distinctive jingle. "Evening, Sheriff," Luke said, offering his tobacco pouch. Cooper accepted, settling his bulk onto a nearby rock with a grunt. For a while, they smoked in companionable silence, watching the last of the light bleed from the sky. "You've got the whole town talking," Cooper said finally. "Not many men would defend what most folks consider a menace. Not many folks bother to look past their fear," Luke countered. Cooper chuckled, a dry sound like wind through dead leaves. "You talk like a man with education. What's someone like you doing in a place like this?" "Looking for something," Luke said honestly. "Just didn't know what until today." The sheriff studied him in the growing darkness. "That girl's dangerous, Mr. Garrett. Maybe not in the way Phelps and his ilk think, but dangerous all the same. She's caught between two worlds now, and that's a hard place to be. Push comes to shove, she'll choose the wolves. They're her family now. You sound like you know something about it." Cooper was quiet for so long Luke thought he wouldn't answer. Then, had a daughter once. Comanche took her when she was 7. Got her back 3 years later, but she weren't the same. Kept trying to run back to them. Said her Comanche mother treated her better than her real ma ever had. We tried everything, locked her up, prayed over her, even took her to a doctor in San Antonio. Nothing worked. One night she slipped out, and we never saw her again. "I'm sorry," Luke said, meaning it. "Point is," Cooper continued, "sometimes you can't bring them back. Sometimes they've gone too far into the wild to ever find their way home. That Apache girl might have had a chance once, but 2 years with the wolves?" He shook his head. "That's a powerful lot of wild to undo." After Cooper left, Luke remained on his rock, thinking. The desert night was alive with sounds, the distant howl of coyotes, the rustle of small creatures in the brush, the whisper of wind through the cacti, and somewhere, perhaps, the soft pad of wolves' feet and one pair of human feet that had learned their rhythm. He thought about eyes that held both wildness and pain, about the gentle hands tending a wounded packmate, about the cry of loss when the wolf fell. Whatever else she was capable of love and grief. That had to count for something. The moon rose full and bright, turning the desert into a landscape of silver and shadow. Luke stood, stretching muscles stiff from sitting, and made a decision. Tomorrow, he'd ride out again. Not with the hunters, not with violence in mind, but with something else. What exactly? He couldn't say, but he knew with a certainty that surprised him that his path and hers were meant to cross again. As he walked back to town, a howl rose from the distant hills, long, mournful, and beautiful. It was joined by others, a chorus of wild voices singing to the moon. And perhaps, though it might have been his imagination, one voice among them sounded almost human. Luke paused, listening, and found himself smiling. "Sing your song, girl," he murmured to the night. "Sing it while you can." Behind him, the lights of Willow Creek flickered like dying stars. And ahead, the desert waited with all its mysteries intact. The iron teeth of the trap had bitten deep. Luke found her just after dawn, the blood trail leading him through a maze of rocks to where she crouched, her leg caught in the cruel device. The wolves circled at a distance, torn between loyalty to their packmate and their instinctive fear of the human who approached. She didn't run, couldn't run, but as Luke dismounted and moved closer, she bared her teeth and produced a sound from her throat that was pure wolf, a warning growl that raised every hair on his neck. Her eyes, those remarkable eyes he'd glimpsed before, were wild with pain and fear. "Easy," Luke said softly, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "I'm not going to hurt you." He might as well have been speaking to the wind. She pressed herself against the red rock behind her, her free leg coiled to kick, her hands curved like claws. The trapped leg was bleeding steadily, the metal teeth having torn through skin and muscle. If it wasn't freed soon, she'd likely lose it to infection or blood loss. Luke set down his rifle, making sure she could see him do it. Then his pistol, laying it carefully on a flat stone. "See? No weapons. I just want to help." The growling intensified. One of the wolves, the scarred female that seemed to be the alpha, took a step closer, lips pulled back to show impressive fangs. Luke froze, knowing that any sudden movement now could trigger an attack from multiple directions. "I know you can understand me," he continued, his voice low and steady. Maybe not all the words, but the meaning. "You're hurt. That trap's not coming off by yourself. You can let me help, or you can die here. Your choice." Something flickered in her eyes. Not trust, nothing as advanced as that, but perhaps a recognition of truth. The growling softened slightly, though her body remained coiled tight as a spring. Luke reached into his saddlebag, moving with exaggerated slowness, and pulled out a canteen. He took a drink himself first, then held it out toward her. "Water, you need it." She watched him with the intensity of a hawk, tracking every movement. When he set the canteen down within her reach and backed away, she hesitated for a long moment before grabbing it. She drank greedily, water spilling down her chin, never taking her eyes off him. "That's it," Luke murmured, encouraged. "Now, about that leg." He moved closer, inch by careful inch. The wolves shifted restlessly, but the alpha female made a soft sound, and they held their positions. When Luke was close enough to see the full damage, he had to suppress a curse. The trap was one of the newer models, designed to hold bears. Its teeth had gone deep. "This is going to hurt," he warned, reaching for the release mechanism. She watched his hands approach her leg, and for a moment, Luke thought she might attack. Then, with visible effort, she forced herself to stillness. Only a slight trembling betrayed her fear. Luke worked quickly, knowing that prolonging this would only make it worse. The mechanism was stiff with rust and blood, and he had to use both hands to force it open. The girl made no sound as the metal teeth withdrew from her flesh, but her whole body went rigid, and her fingers dug furrows in the sandy ground. The moment she was free, she scrambled backward, leaving a trail of blood. Luke didn't pursue. Instead, he pulled out his medical supplies, bandages, a bottle of whiskey for cleaning wounds, and some of the healing salve he'd bought from a Mexican trader. "You need to let me wrap that," he said, gesturing to her leg. "It'll get infected otherwise." She shook her head violently, a very human gesture that looked strange after all her animal behavior. But she was also swaying slightly, the blood loss beginning to tell. Luke had an idea. He deliberately turned his back to her, making himself vulnerable. and began treating a scratch on his own hand with exaggerated care. He made sure she could see each step, cleaning with the whiskey, applying salve, wrapping with bandage. "It's medicine," he explained to the desert air, knowing she was watching. "Helps healing, stops the bad spirits that make wounds go rotten." He finished with his minor scratch and carefully repacked the supplies, leaving them sitting on the ground. Then he backed away to his original position near his horse. "Your choice," he said simply. The sun climbed higher, sending waves of heat shimmering off the rocks. The wolves had settled into patches of shade, though they remained alert. The girl stared at the medical supplies, then at her wounded leg, clearly fighting some internal battle. Finally, pain and practicality won over fear. She crawled forward, grabbed the supplies, and retreated again. Luke watched, fascinated despite himself, as she mimicked his earlier actions. Her hands were surprisingly deft as she cleaned and wrapped the wound, though she hissed through her teeth when the whiskey hit the raw flesh. "You've seen this before," Luke said, more to himself than to her. "Someone showed you about medicine, once upon a time." She looked up sharply at his words, and for just a moment, something almost like recognition flickered across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by the usual wariness. When she finished, she tried to stand and immediately collapsed. The leg wouldn't hold her weight. She made a sound of frustration that was entirely human, then seemed to catch herself, looking almost embarrassed. "You can't travel on that leg," Luke said. "Not for a few days at least. Those hunters are still out there. They'll find you if you stay in the open." She understood the word hunters. He could see it in the way her body tensed, the way her eyes darted to scan the horizon. One of the wolves whined softly, and she made a gesture that clearly meant, "Go." They hesitated, but another gesture, more emphatic, sent them melting into the landscape. "Loyal friends," Luke observed. "But smart of you to send them away. They're too easy to track as a group." Now it was just the two of them under the climbing sun. Luke could see her struggling with the situation, the need for help warring with every instinct that told her to flee. He decided to make it easier. "There's a cave about a mile north," he said, standing and gathering his weapons. "Small entrance, but opens up inside. Good water seep in the back. Hunters don't know about it. I only found it by accident last year. You hole up there. That leg'll heal in a week or so." He mounted his horse, then looked back at her. "I'll leave some supplies at the mouth of Skeleton Canyon tomorrow. Dawn, food, medicine, ammunition if you've got a gun hidden somewhere. After that, you're on your own." He turned to go, then paused. "That trap was meant for you specifically. They're getting smarter, learning your patterns. You might want to think about changing territories. Just a suggestion." As he rode away, he heard her speak for the first time. Her voice was hoarse from disuse. The words heavily accented with Apache inflection mixed with something else, something wild. "Why, you help?" Luke turned in his saddle. She had managed to stand, balanced on one leg, looking small and fierce and lost all at once. "Because someone should," he said simply. He thought she might say more, but she just watched him with those extraordinary eyes. As he crested the ridge that would take him out of sight, he looked back one more time. She was still standing there, a small figure against the vastness of the desert, no longer quite animal but not yet returned to human. That night, Luke lay in his bedroll under the stars, unable to sleep. He kept thinking about that moment of almost recognition in her eyes, the way she'd known how to use the medical supplies. Somewhere in that wild creature was a girl who'd once had a different life. The question was whether any of that girl remained, and if so, whether she wanted to be found. He'd told her about the cave, promised supplies. That should have been the end of it. He'd done more than most would, shown compassion where others offered only bullets. He could ride on with a clear conscience, leave Willow Creek and its problems behind. So why did he feel like he was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to take a step that would change everything? In the distance, wolves howled, and Luke wondered if she was with them or alone in the cave. tending her wounds, and perhaps, just perhaps, remembering what it felt like to hear a human voice that didn't mean danger. A kiss from a reckless cowboy, he murmured to himself, remembering an old Apache tale an Army scout had once told him about transformation and the power of human connection. But first, she has to remember how to be human enough to receive it. He closed his eyes, and when sleep finally came, he dreamed of Wild Eyes slowly learning to trust, and of the patient work of bringing someone back from the edge of the world. She came to Willow Creek in the deepest hour of night, when even the saloon had closed its doors and the town slept under a blanket of stars. Her leg had healed enough to bear weight, though she still favored it slightly. The wolves remained hidden in the desert, waiting for her signal, as she crept along the edges of civilization like a ghost made flesh. The town fascinated and terrified her in equal measure. She pressed herself against the wall of the bakery, breathing in the lingering scent of bread and sugar, memories stirring like dust devils in her mind. Through windows glowing with lamplight, she glimpsed another world, chairs and tables, beds with clean white sheets, the mysterious rituals of civilized life. At the far end of town, someone was playing a violin. The notes drifted through the still air, a melody both mournful and sweet. She found herself drawn toward the sound, her bare feet silent on the dusty street. The music came from a small house where a man sat on his porch, eyes closed, lost in his playing. She crouched in the shadows, transfixed. Music, she remembered music. Someone singing softly in Apache, hands clapping rhythm, the sound of drums in firelight. The memories came in fragments, too brief to grasp fully, but enough to make her eyes sting with unexpected tears. The violinist, old Samuel Harris, though she didn't know his name, played on, unaware of his audience. When he finally stopped, she almost made a sound of protest. He stood, stretching, and went inside. The light in his window went out, leaving her alone with the echo of beauty she'd forgotten existed. She should leave. Every instinct screamed at her to return to the safety of the desert, to her pack, to the life she understood. But something held her there, some hunger that had nothing to do with food. A door creaked nearby. She spun, ready to flee, and found herself face to face with a child. The boy couldn't have been more than 6, rubbing sleep from his eyes, probably seeking the outhouse. They stared at each other, both frozen in surprise. Then the child smiled. "Are you the wolf lady?" he whispered, more curious than afraid. She didn't answer, couldn't answer, but something in her posture must have confirmed it. The boy's eyes went wide with wonder. "My ma says you're dangerous," he continued. "But you don't look dangerous. You look sad." Sad. The word hit her like a physical blow. Was that what this feeling was? This hollow ache that no amount of running with the pack could fill? "Tommy," a woman's voice, sharp with fear. "Thomas Mitchell, you get back here this instant." The boy's mother appeared in the doorway, took one look at the scene, and screamed. The sound shattered the night's peace like a rock through glass. Lights began appearing in windows. Voices rose in alarm. "The wolf girl! The wolf girl's in town!" She ran. What else could she do? Behind her, the town erupted into chaos. Men stumbled from their homes, pulling on boots, grabbing rifles. Women herded children inside. Dogs barked frantically. Adding to the din, "There, by the mercantile!" A shot rang out, splintering wood inches from her head. She dove between buildings, using every shadow, every obstacle. More shots followed, wild and dangerous in the darkness. Someone's chicken coop exploded in a flurry of feathers and squawking. "Don't shoot, you fools!" Sheriff Cooper's voice boomed over the chaos. "You'll hit someone's house." But mob mentality had taken hold. She could hear them organizing, forming groups to cut off escape routes. They knew the town. She didn't. It was only a matter of time. She scrambled up onto a roof, her wounded leg protesting. From there she could see the desert, freedom tantalizingly close. But between her and safety stood a growing crowd of armed townspeople. "Got her cornered," someone shouted. "She's on the miller's roof." A ladder appeared against the building. She backed away, trapped between the advancing men and a 2-story drop. Fear clawed at her throat. Not fear of death, she'd faced that many times, but fear of capture, of cages, of becoming a spectacle for their entertainment or experimentation. "Stand back, all of you!" Luke Garrett pushed through the crowd, his face tight with anger. He'd been camped outside town, heard the commotion, and ridden in to find a lynch mob in the making. "This is town business." "Garrett," Edgar Phelps said coldly. "Stand aside. So you can shoot a frightened girl off a roof? I don't think so." "That ain't no girl," someone called out. "That's an animal." Luke drew his pistol, not aiming at anyone but making his intentions clear. "Anyone who fires on her goes through me first. Sheriff, you going to allow this?" Cooper pushed forward, his face grim. "Everyone calm down. Nobody's shooting anybody. You men, get that ladder down. Miss," he called up to the roof. "You need to come down peaceful-like. No one's going to hurt you if you cooperate." She understood enough to know it was a lie, or at best, a promise the sheriff couldn't keep. The crowd wanted blood. She could smell their fear and anger like a physical thing. Luke holstered his weapon and stepped forward. "Let me go up. Just me, no weapons." "You're a fool, Garrett." Phelps spat. "Maybe, but I'm the only one here she might trust." He looked up at her. "Remember me? I helped you with the trap. I'm coming up, slow and easy, no tricks." He climbed the ladder while the crowd held its breath. She watched him come, poised to leap if necessary, leg or no leg. When he reached the roof, he sat down a careful distance away, like he had all the time in the world. "Hell of a mess," he said conversationally. "You really know how to make an entrance." Despite everything, she almost smiled. He caught it, that flicker of human response, and pressed on. "They're scared of you. Scared people do stupid things. But if you come with me, peaceful-like, I promise I'll get you out safe. You have my word." "Your word don't mean nothing," someone shouted from below. Luke ignored them, keeping his eyes on her. "I know you understand me, and I think you know I've been straight with you so far. This is your best chance. Take it." She looked from him to the crowd below, calculating odds. The wolves were out there, calling to her, but they couldn't help her here, and her leg, still weak, wouldn't survive a jump and a chase. Slowly, carefully, she nodded. "That's my girl," Luke said softly. "Now, we're going to climb down together. You stick close to me. Anyone makes a move, you get behind me quick. Understood?" Another nod. He stood, offering his hand. After a long hesitation, she took it. Her palm was calloused, rough from life in the wild, but unmistakably human. They descended the ladder into a sea of hostile faces. She pressed close to Luke's back, every muscle ready to fight or flee. He kept himself between her and the worst of the crowd, moving steadily toward where his horse waited. "You can't just let her go." Phelps was nearly apoplectic. "She's a menace." "She's hurt and scared," Luke countered. "And she's leaving. Tonight, you've made it clear she's not welcome here. After what she's done, what has she done?" Luke rounded on the man. "Survived? Lived the only way she knew how after losing everything? My God, people, where's your Christian charity?" "Don't you dare." Phelps started forward, but Cooper stepped in. "Enough. Garrett's right. The girl goes tonight, and she doesn't come back." He looked at Luke. "You make sure of that." Luke nodded and helped her onto his horse, swinging up behind her. She was trembling, though whether from fear or anger he couldn't tell. As they rode through the parting crowd, young Tommy Mitchell broke free from his mother's grasp. "Bye, wolf lady," he called out, waving. "I hope you find what you're looking for." She turned at his words, and Luke felt her relax slightly. One small voice of kindness in a sea of hate. Sometimes that was all it took to remember that humanity wasn't entirely lost. They rode out of Willow Creek in silence, leaving behind the lights and the anger and the fear. Only when they were well into the desert did she speak, her voice rusty but clear. "Why?" It was the same question she'd asked before, but this time it carried more weight. Why risk himself for her? Why stand against his own kind? Luke considered his answer carefully. Because I've been the outsider too. Maybe not to your extent, but enough to know how it feels. And because... He paused, searching for words. Because I looked in your eyes and saw someone worth saving. She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't respond. Then, so softly he almost missed it. I remember being saved. Before, someone tried, failed. It was the most human thing she'd said, and the pain in it was unmistakable. Luke felt her lean back against him, just slightly. A gesture of trust that was probably harder for her than facing down the entire town. They rode on through the night, toward the hidden places where she could heal and decide who she wanted to be. Behind them. Willow Creek settled back into sleep, but Luke knew the peace wouldn't last. The fear and hatred would fester, would seek outlet. He'd bought her time, nothing more. But sometimes, time was all you needed to find your way back to who you were meant to be. The cave was cool and dark, a sanctuary carved by ancient waters into the living rock. Luke had brought her here after the incident in town, and for 3 days now they had shared this strange, tentative existence. He tended her wounds with gentle hands while she watched him with eyes that gradually lost their wild edge. By the light of a small fire, Luke worked on redressing her leg. The wound from the trap had reopened during their flight from Willow Creek, and infection threatened. She sat still as the stone while he cleaned it, though he could see the pain in the tight line of her jaw. "You're tough," he said, applying the healing salve. "Tougher than most men I've known." She studied his face in the firelight, then spoke haltingly. "Pain is, teacher, learn or die. Wolves know this." It was the longest statement she'd made yet, and Luke treasured each word like gold. Her English was broken, mixed with Apache constructions, but improving daily as memories surfaced. "The wolves taught you well," he acknowledged, wrapping fresh bandages around her calf. "But you weren't born to them. You had another teacher once." Her hand moved unconsciously to a leather pouch she wore around her neck, the only human artifact she'd kept through her years in the wild. "Grandmother. She taught, medicine, plants, healing." Her voice cracked. "Dead now. All dead." Luke's hands stilled on the bandages. "I'm sorry. Soldiers came. Said we were hostile. We were just living." She stared into the fire, and Luke could see her retreating into memory. "I was gathering roots, heard shooting, ran back, too late, found them." She stopped, unable to continue. Luke wanted to comfort her, but didn't know how. What comfort could he offer for such loss? "The wolves found you?" he prompted gently. She nodded. 3 days I stayed with bodies, singing death songs. Wolves came, curious, not afraid. Mother wolf had lost pups to hunters. She understood. Pain knows pain. Luke finished the bandaging in silence, overwhelmed by the simple tragedy of her story. A child orphaned by violence, adopted by creatures who showed more compassion than her own species. Over the next days, he taught her words while she taught him survival. She showed him which cacti held water, which roots could sustain life in the harsh desert. He helped her remember table manners, the use of utensils, the small civilizing rituals she'd forgotten. "Fork," he said, demonstrating with a wooden one he'd carved. "For eating." She took it awkwardly, her fingers more accustomed to tearing meat with her hands. But she persisted, determined to remember. "I used these before." "That's right. You're remembering." She looked at him with something like wonder. Why do you care if I remember?" Luke considered the question. Why did he care? He could have ridden away days ago, left her to her fate. Instead, here he was, playing teacher to a wild child who might never fully return to civilization. "Because everyone deserves a chance to choose," he said finally. "You should get to decide if you want to be wolf or woman or something in between. But you can't choose if you don't remember all your options." That night, she spoke more freely, stories tumbling out as if a dam had broken. She told him about learning to hunt with the pack, about harsh winters when they'd shared kills to survive, about the young wolf she'd raised from a pup after its mother died, only to lose him to a rancher's poison bait. His name was... She paused, struggling. No, wolves don't name, but I called him Shadow in my mind. He followed everywhere. Her eyes glistened. Died in my arms? Poison is cruel death. Luke built up the fire against the desert chill. Outside, he could hear her pack calling, their howls echoing off the canyon walls. She tilted her head, listening, but made no move to join them. They're worried about you, he observed. They know I am, changing, becoming less wolf. She looked troubled. Maybe they leave me, find proper wolf to follow. Would that be so bad? You could come back to the human world, start over. She shook her head violently. Town people hate me, fear me. You saw. Not all towns are like Willow Creek. There are places where Apache girl raised by wolves is welcome? Her laugh was bitter. No such place. Luke wanted to argue, but he knew she was probably right. The world had little kindness for those who didn't fit its narrow definitions. There might be one place, he said slowly. There's a mission about a week's ride south. Sister Catherine runs it. She takes in strays of all kinds. Orphans, outcasts, people with nowhere else to go. She wouldn't care about your past. Mission? The word seemed to trigger something. With bell and garden? You know it. She pressed her palms against her temples, concentrating. Maybe pictures in my head, but scattered like broken mirror. Over the following days, more pieces came together. Her name surfaced first, Ayana, meaning eternal blossom in Apache. She remembered her grandmother's name, her mother's face, fragments of ceremonies and stories. Each memory was a small victory, but also a fresh grief for all that was lost. Luke found himself growing attached to her recovery, celebrating each breakthrough. When she successfully used a spoon to eat the rabbit stew he'd made, he grinned like she'd accomplished something monumental, which, for her, it was. I must look strange to you, she said one evening, attempting to comb her matted hair with a brush he'd brought. Not human, not animal, nothing. Not nothing, Luke corrected firmly. You're remarkable. You survived what would have killed most people. You found a way to live when everything was taken from you. That's not nothing, that's everything. She stopped brushing, looking at him with those dark, gold-flecked eyes. You are kind, first kind human in so long. She reached out tentatively, touching his hand where it rested on his knee. Thank you. The contact was brief, but Luke felt it like a shock of lightning. He'd been careful to maintain distance, to keep things proper despite their strange circumstances. But that simple touch awakened feelings he'd been trying to ignore. Ayana, he said, testing her name. You should know. The hunters haven't given up. They'll keep looking. That bounty is still on your head. I know. She resumed brushing her hair, wincing as she hit a particularly bad tangle. Always running, wolf way, but tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of being alone. She set down the brush in frustration. But don't know how to stop, don't know how to be human again. Luke moved closer, taking the brush from her. May I? She nodded, turning her back to him. He worked carefully through the tangles, patient with each knot. It was an intimate act, one that required trust. The fire crackled, sending shadows dancing on the cave walls. My mother used to brush my sister's hair, Luke said quietly. Before the fever took them both. Haven't thought about that in years. You lost family, too. Most people out here have... It's a hard land. He separated a section of her hair, working through it methodically. But loss doesn't have to define us. We can choose what comes next. Choose, she repeated softly. Always you talk of choosing. Wolves don't choose. They just are. But you're not just wolf. You're also Ayana, and Ayana gets to choose. When he finished, her hair fell in dark waves past her shoulders. She turned to face him, and for a moment they were very close, close enough that he could see the pulse at her throat, the uncertainty and hope warring in her eyes. Luke, she said, and his name on her lips was like a prayer. What if I choose wrong? Then you choose again. That's the human gift. We get to keep choosing, keep trying, keep becoming. Outside, her pack howled again, and this time she rose and went to the cave mouth. Luke followed, watching as she tilted her head back and answered their call. It was a sound of love and farewell, of gratitude and release. When the last echo faded, she turned to him with tears on her cheeks. They understand. They say, "Goodbye." Luke opened his arms, and she stepped into them, burying her face against his chest. He held her while she grieved this latest loss, this necessary separation from the only family she'd known for years. "Not goodbye," he murmured into her hair. "Just until we meet again. They'll always be part of you, Ayanna, always." She pulled back enough to look up at him, and time seemed to stop. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility. Luke knew he should step away, knew 100 reasons why this was complicated. Instead, he cupped her face gently, thumb brushing away a tear. "Whatever you choose," he said, "you won't be alone. I promise you that." The hunters came at dawn, their approach heralded by the clatter of hooves on stone and the metallic click of rifles being checked. Luke woke to the sound, instantly alert. Beside him, Ayanna was already crouched at the cave mouth, her body tense as a drawn bow. "How many?" he whispered, checking his own weapons. "4, maybe 5. Her nostrils flared slightly, reading the wind. "Same ones from before. They tracked us." Luke cursed under his breath. He'd been careful, but clearly not careful enough. Through a gap in the rocks, he could see them: Wheeler, Sullivan, Brennan, and Cray, along with 2 others he didn't recognize. They were spreading out, methodical in their search. "The back passage," he said urgently. "We can—" "Blocked." Her voice was flat. "Checked yesterday. Rock slide." They were trapped. Luke's mind raced through options. None of them good. In open ground. They might have a chance, but the hunters knew they were here somewhere. It was only a matter of time. "Stay hidden," he told her. "I'll go out, lead them away." "No." She gripped his arm, her fingers strong. "They kill you. They want me, but they kill you for helping." She was right, of course. These men were beyond the reach of law out here, and they'd shown no reluctance to shoot before. "Then we fight," Luke said grimly. "We run." She was already moving, gathering what few possessions they had. Always another way, wolves teach. Never just one path. She led him deeper into the cave, to a section he hadn't explored. The passage narrowed until they had to crawl, the rock pressing close on all sides. Luke fought down claustrophobia, trusting her instincts. Behind them, voices echoed off stone. The hunters had found the main cave. They were here, fire still warm. "Fan out, check every passage." The crawlway opened into a chimney of rock. Above, Luke could see a slice of sky. Ayanna was already climbing, finding handholds he could barely see. He followed, trying to match her fluid movements. They were halfway up when the shooting started. "There, in the chimney!" Bullets whined off stone, sending chips flying. Luke felt one tug at his shirt, too close, above him. Ayanna cried out, not in pain, but in fury. She'd been grazed across the shoulder, blood staining her shirt. "Keep climbing," Luke shouted, returning fire awkwardly with one hand. It was enough to make the hunters seek cover, buying them precious seconds. They burst from the top of the chimney into blazing daylight. Luke's horse was gone, spooked or stolen, but Ayanna was already running, her injury ignored. Luke followed, scanning for cover. The landscape here was a maze of standing stones and narrow canyons, carved by wind and ancient waters. Ayanna knew it intimately, leading him through passages barely wide enough for a single person. But the hunters knew tracking, and they were motivated by greed and wounded pride. "Circle around." Cray's voice carried on the wind. "Cut them off at Devil's Throat." Ayanna heard it too. She changed direction, but Luke could tell she was tiring. The wound on her shoulder, though shallow, was bleeding steadily. They needed a defensible position or a miracle. They got both. The wolves appeared like gray ghosts from the rocks. Not just Ayanna's pack, but others too. A dozen. Maybe more. They flowed around Ayanna and Luke like water, placing themselves between the humans they protected and the threat behind. "No," Ayanna breathed. "They'll be slaughtered." But the wolves knew their business. They didn't attack directly, but used the terrain, appearing and disappearing, circling the hunters and driving them into confusion. Snarls echoed off stone from every direction, making it impossible to tell how many there were. "Mother of God," Luke heard Brennan say, "we're surrounded." "Stand firm," Cray ordered, but there was fear in his voice now. The alpha female materialized on a boulder above the hunters, lips pulled back in a terrifying display. When Sullivan raised his rifle toward her, 2 more wolves appeared at his flanks, causing him to spin wildly. "This ain't worth $50. Wheeler broke first, backing away. "This ain't natural." The panic spread. One of the new hunters fired wildly, nearly hitting Brennan. In the chaos, the wolves pressed their advantage, not attacking but herding, driving the men back the way they'd come. Only Cray stood his ground, his cold eyes finding Ayanna through the confusion. He raised his rifle with deadly purpose. Luke didn't remember drawing his gun. One moment Cray was aiming, the next he was clutching his shoulder, his rifle spinning away. Luke's shot had been precise, wounding, not killing. "The next one goes through your heart," Luke called out. "Take your men and go. Don't come back." Cray stared at them with naked hatred, but he was outnumbered and wounded. "This isn't over," he snarled, but he retreated with the others. The wolves followed them for a mile, ensuring they truly left. Then, as suddenly as they'd appeared, they melted away, all except Ayanna's pack, who approached cautiously. Ayanna sank to her knees, and the alpha female came to her, touching noses in greeting. The other wolves circled, sniffing, re-establishing bonds. Luke watched, understanding that this was both reunion and farewell. "They came when you needed them," he said softly. "Pack protects pack." She buried her face in the alpha's fur, even when one must walk different path. She stood slowly, her hand going to her wounded shoulder. Luke tore strips from his shirt to bind it properly. As he worked, she leaned against him, exhausted. "We can't stay here," he said. "They'll come back with more men." "I know." She looked at her wolves one last time. "You spoke of mission, with Sister who takes in strays." "Sister Catherine, yes. Will you come with me to this place?" Luke finished tying the bandage and turned her to face him. "Ayanna, I need you to understand something. I'm not a good man. I've done things, been places. I'm a drifter, a man with no home and no prospects. You deserve better than—" She silenced him by placing her fingers over his lips. "You are man who sees girl where others see monster. Man who risks everything for stranger. Man who keeps promises." Her eyes held his steadily. "I know what I deserve. I choose you." The simplicity of it took his breath away. Here was a woman who'd lost everything, who'd survived the impossible, who'd lived with wolves and retained her humanity. And she chose him. "It won't be easy," he warned. "People will talk. They'll judge. Some places won't welcome us. Then we find places that do." She smiled, and it transformed her face. "Or we make our own place. Together." Luke pulled her close, mindful of her injury. "Together," he agreed. They found shelter for the night in a shallow cave, little more than an overhang of rock. Luke built a small fire while Ayanna said her final farewells to the pack. He gave her privacy for it, understanding that this moment was sacred. When she returned, her eyes were red but peaceful. "They go north. Good hunting there. Safe. And us. South, to new life." She settled beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Luke, am I human enough now for the world?" He considered the question seriously. "You're human enough, but Ayanna, don't lose all the wolf. That wild strength, that fierce loyalty, that freedom, that's part of you. The best part Maybe. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, in stories grandmother told, shapeshifters must choose. Human or animal. Cannot be both. Stories aren't always right. Maybe you're writing a new story. One where a woman can run with wolves and walk among men. Where wildness and civilization can exist in one heart. And where reckless cowboys can find home with Apache wolf girls. Especially that, Luke agreed, allowing himself a smile. The fire crackled between them and the vast desert night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The journey to the mission, the adjustment to civilization, the inevitable struggles of two people from different worlds trying to build something together. But tonight, they had this, the warmth of fire and companionship. The bonds of trust forged in danger, the promise of choice and change. Ayanna leaned her head against Luke's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her carefully. "Thank you," she whispered. "For seeing me, for believing I could choose. Thank you," he replied, "for choosing to be found." In the distance, wolves howled, a song of farewell and blessing. Ayanna listened with tears in her eyes but didn't answer. She was choosing a different song now, one that might include violin music and laughter, words of love in multiple languages, and the particular harmony two hearts could make when they decided to beat as one. The desert stretched endlessly around them, harsh and beautiful and full of possibilities. And somewhere in that vastness, a new story was beginning, not of a girl raised by wolves or a reckless cowboy, but of two people who'd found in each other the home they'd never known they were searching for. The Apache village appeared like a mirage in the shimmering heat, a cluster of wickiups and adobe structures nestled in a valley where a small stream provided life. Luke and Ayanna had been walking for 2 days, their water nearly gone, when an Apache scout found them. The warrior appeared from nowhere, rifle aimed, eyes hard with suspicion. Ayanna stepped forward, speaking rapidly in Apache. The man's expression shifted from hostility to surprise, then something like recognition. "You are the lost child," he said in accented English. "The one who runs with wolves. I am Ayanna." She replied simply, "Granddaughter of Morning Star, I seek my people." The scout studied her for a long moment, then lowered his weapon. "Come, the elders will want to see this." The village received them with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Children peeked from behind their mothers' skirts, and dogs barked at the strangers. But as word spread of who Ayanna was, or might be, people began to gather. An elderly woman pushed through the crowd, her face weathered by decades of desert sun. She stopped short when she saw Ayanna, one hand going to her chest. "Child," she breathed. "You have your mother's eyes." Ayanna stared at the woman, memories stirring. Aunt Desba?" The woman nodded, tears streaming down her lined face. "We thought you dead with the others. When we found the bodies, you were gone. We searched, but—" She reached out tentatively, touching Ayanna's face as if to confirm she was real. "Wolves." Ayanna said simply, "They saved me." The reunion drew the entire village. Stories were shared, how the attack had happened, how the survivors had fled to this hidden valley, how they'd mourned the lost family. Ayanna listened with a mixture of joy and sorrow, finding relatives she'd forgotten existed, but not everyone was welcoming. Some muttered about the wildness in her, the way she moved, the wolf-like alertness that never left her eyes. And there was the matter of Luke, a white man in their midst, clearly connected to their lost daughter. The chief, a dignified man named Joseph Crow Feather, addressed this directly. "You bring an enemy among us," he said to Ayanna. "I bring a friend," she corrected. "The one who helped me remember how to be human. Without him, I would still be running wild, lost to both worlds. The whites have taken much from us." Crow Feather said, "Trust is difficult." Luke, who had remained silent, now spoke. "I don't ask for trust I haven't earned, only the chance to prove myself. Ayanna saved my life as much as I might have helped her. I owe her and her people a debt." The chief studied him carefully. "You would stay here, live as Apache?" I would live wherever Ayanna chooses to be. Luke said simply, your ways or mine or something in between. I'm not tied to any one path. This answer seemed to please the chief. We will see. For now, you are guests. They were given a small wickiup at the edge of the village. That night, Ayanna sat by the fire teaching Luke basic Apache words while her aunt prepared a traditional meal. It was strange, being surrounded by the familiar yet feeling foreign to it all. You're quiet, Luke observed, watching her struggle with weaving, a skill her hands had forgotten. I thought finding my people would make everything clear, she admitted. But I feel between, not fully Apache anymore, not white, not wolf. What am I? You're Ayanna, Luke said firmly. That's enough. Over the following days, they settled into village rhythms. Luke proved his worth by hunting, his skills impressing the warriors. Ayanna relearned traditional crafts and ceremonies, her aunt patiently reteaching what had been lost. But it was during a healing ceremony that things shifted dramatically. A child had fallen ill with fever, and the village medicine man was away. The mother was desperate, and Ayanna found herself stepping forward. I can help, she said, remembering her grandmother's teachings. I need willow bark, sage, and... She listed ingredients, her hands moving with sudden certainty. The knowledge was there, buried but not lost. Under her aunt's watchful eye, she prepared the remedies her grandmother had taught her so long ago. Through the night, she tended the child, singing the old healing songs that came back to her like returning birds. By dawn, the fever had broken. The child would live. You have the gift, her aunt said with wonder. Like your grandmother, the healing hands. Word spread quickly. Others came seeking help, an elder with joint pain, a woman with persistent headaches, a warrior with a wound that wouldn't heal. Ayanna treated them all, her confidence growing with each success. The spirits did not abandon you, Crowfeather observed one evening. Even among the wolves, they kept the healer's gift alive in you. But not everyone was pleased. Grey Wolf, a young warrior who'd lost family in the same raid that orphaned Ayanna, viewed her with suspicion. She brings danger, he argued in council. The whites know of her. They will come looking, bringing death as they always do. His words carried weight. The village had remained hidden precisely because they avoided white attention. Ayanna's presence, and Luke's, threatened that security. Then we make her invisible, suggested White Dove, an elder woman respected for her wisdom. To the white world, the wolf girl is dead. Here, she is simply Ayanna, healer and daughter of the people. And him? Grey Wolf pointed at Luke. He cannot be made invisible. I can leave, Luke offered, though the words clearly pained him. If my presence endangers the village... No! Ayanna's voice was fierce. We face what comes together, or not at all. The debate continued for hours, but eventually a compromise was reached. Luke would learn Apache ways, prove himself over time. Ayanna would stay, serving as healer, but would be prepared to flee if hunters came seeking the wolf girl. That night, Ayanna and Luke walked to the stream that bordered the village. The sound of water over stones was soothing, and for a moment they could pretend the world's complications didn't exist. Are you happy here? Luke asked. Happy? Ayanna considered the word. I am healing. Finding pieces of myself I thought lost forever, but I am not the girl who would have grown up here. Too much has happened. The wolf is part of me now. Always will be. She looked at him in the moonlight. And you? Can you be happy here? I can be happy anywhere you are. Luke said honestly, I've been drifting my whole adult life, looking for something I couldn't name. Now I know what it was. Not a place, but a person. A reason to stop running. Ayanna stepped closer, reaching up to touch his face. The elders think we should marry. Make your place here official. And what do you think? I think, she said slowly, that Apache ways say a woman chooses her husband, and I have chosen. Luke caught her hand, pressing it to his cheek. Even knowing what I am, a man with no roots, no family, no wealth to offer. You offered me humanity when I had forgotten it existed. You offer me partnership in whatever comes. That is worth more than all the wealth in the territory." They were interrupted by shouts from the village. "Racing back! They found chaos!" A rider had arrived with news. The army was moving against Apache settlements throughout the region. Not their hidden valley yet, but it was only a matter of time. "We must prepare to move," Crow Feather announced. "Deeper into the mountains where they cannot follow. Or we could fight," Grey Wolf argued. "With what?" The chief's voice was tired. "We are fewer than 50, with children and elders. The army has thousands." As the village erupted in debate, Ayanna felt the old wildness stirring, the urge to run, to disappear into the landscape where no one could find her. But she looked at Luke, at her aunt, at the people who'd welcomed her back, and knew she couldn't abandon them. "There might be another way," Luke said quietly. "I have contacts among the army, men who owe me favors from my soldier days. Maybe I can learn their plans, redirect their attention." "You would spy for us?" Crow Feather asked. "I would protect my family," Luke corrected. "All of it." The chief nodded slowly. "This is dangerous. If you are caught, I understand the risks." Ayanna gripped his arm. "We go together." "No, you're needed here. Your healing skills, your knowledge, and—" He smiled slightly. "Someone needs to plan a wedding for when I return." She wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. The village needed her, and she had just found her place among them. Still, watching him prepare to leave felt like tearing off a piece of her soul. The night before his departure, the village held a ceremony. Not quite a wedding, but a binding, a promise made before the spirits and the people. Ayanna wore her grandmother's dress, carefully preserved by her aunt. Luke dressed in Apache clothing, looking both foreign and right. "You are two paths becoming one," White Dove intoned. "Neither fully Apache nor white, but something new. May your joining bring strength to both peoples." They spent their last night together by the stream, holding each other under the vast desert stars. Neither spoke of the danger ahead, the uncertainty of their future. Instead, they focused on the present, the sound of water, the warmth of touch, the miracle of finding love in the most unlikely circumstances. At dawn, Luke prepared to ride out on a horse the village had provided. Ayanna walked with him to the valley's edge. "Come back to me," she said simply. "Always," he promised. "No matter what happens, I'll find my way back to you. The wolf girl and the reckless cowboy, we're not done writing our story yet." He kissed her then, a kiss that held all their hopes and fears and promises. When he rode away, Ayanna stood watching until he disappeared into the shimmer of heat and distance. Behind her, the village stirred to life. There was work to do, preparations to make, people to heal, a culture to reclaim. And somewhere in the vast territory, the man she loved rode toward danger with her heart in his keeping. She touched the wolf-tooth necklace at her throat, a gift from her pack, a reminder of all she'd been and all she was becoming. Then she turned and walked back to her people, ready to face whatever came next. The seasons turned, and with them, the fears of army intervention gradually faded. Luke's mission had succeeded, through careful negotiation and calling in old favors. He'd managed to have their valley marked as surveyed and empty on military maps. The Apache settlement remained hidden, a secret pocket of peace in a turbulent territory. News of the outside world filtered in slowly. The wolf girl of Willow Creek had become legend, her story growing with each telling until she was more myth than memory. Some said she'd died in the desert. Others claimed she'd transformed fully into a wolf and now led a massive pack that haunted the borderlands. Only a few suspected the truth, that she lived quietly as a healer in a place maps had forgotten. On this particular dawn, Ayanna stood at the edge of the valley, her silhouette painted gold by the rising sun. Her hair, now kept long and braided in the Apache way, gleamed with health. The wildness hadn't left her eyes, but it had been tempered by peace, by purpose, by love. Luke found her there, as he often did. His arms came around her from behind, and she leaned into his warmth. "You're up early," he murmured against her ear. "The sunrise called me." She turned in his arms to face him. "And I wanted to check the horizon. Old habits." "See anything?" "Only possibilities," she said, smiling. "White Dove says the baby will come with the spring rains." Luke's hands moved to her still flat belly, wonder in his eyes. They'd been married nearly a year by Apache custom, and this blessing felt like the universe's affirmation of their unlikely love. "Are you happy?" he asked. The same question he'd posed months ago, but now carrying different weight. "I am whole," she answered. The girl who ran with wolves, the woman who loves a wandering cowboy, the healer who serves her people, all pieces of the same soul. "Yes, Luke, I am happy." The village had accepted them fully now. Luke had proven himself time and again, hunting, building, even learning enough Apache to tell stories to the children. His favorite was, of course, the tale of a reckless cowboy whose kiss brought a wolf girl back to humanity, though he told it with enough humor to make Ayanna blush and the children giggle. "Uncle Luke," a voice called. Young Thomas Running Bear raced toward them, all knobby knees and excitement. "Elder Joseph wants you, says there's a visitor." They exchanged glances. Visitors were rare and rarely brought good news. Together, they walked back to the village center where Crowfeather waited with a stranger, a Mexican trader they'd dealt with before. Don Miguel. Luke greeted him. "What brings you to our valley?" The trader's weathered face was grave. "News from Willow Creek. Senor Garrett, I thought you should know. The man called Cray, he's been telling stories, says he knows where the wolf girl went, talks of a hidden Apache village. He's trying to raise a group to come looking." Ayanna felt the old fear stir, but Luke's hand on her back steadied her. "How many believe him?" "Not many, not yet. Most think he's crazy from the desert sun, but—" Don Miguel hesitated. "There's a new sheriff in Willow Creek. Young man, ambitious. He's listening to Cray's stories." Crowfeather's face was stone. "We cannot have whites coming here. It would mean the end of everything." "I'll go," Luke said immediately. "Talk to this new sheriff. Convince him Cray's chasing shadows." "No." Ayanna's voice was firm. "We go together, or not at all." "Ayanna, you can't—" "I can't hide forever," she interrupted. "And perhaps it's time to put the ghost of the wolf girl to rest properly." The debate was long and heated, but eventually a plan emerged. Luke and Ayanna would return to Willow Creek, not as fugitives, but as a married couple. The wolf girl was gone. In her place stood Mrs. Luke Garrett, respectable wife and skilled healer. It was a risk, but perhaps facing the past was the only way to secure the future. They rode out 3 days later. Ayanna dressed in the Mexican-style clothing common to many frontier wives, her hair pinned up properly. Only someone looking closely would see the wild grace in her movements, the alertness that never quite faded. Willow Creek had changed in their absence. New buildings lined the main street, and the railroad had come through, bringing prosperity and strangers. Luke and Ayanna attracted some curious glances, but nothing more, just another couple in a town now used to transients. They took a room at the newer hotel, and Luke made inquiries. The new sheriff, James Morrison, was indeed young and ambitious, but he was also, by all accounts, fair-minded. Luke decided to approach him directly. Sheriff Morrison's office was tidy, organized, a stark contrast to old Sheriff Cooper's casual chaos. The man himself was perhaps 25, with intelligent eyes and a firm handshake. "Mr. Garrett," he said, gesturing to a chair. "I've heard your name. You were here during the excitement with the wolf girl." "I was," Luke acknowledged. "Wild times. I heard Sam Cray's still spinning tales about her." Morrison's expression soured slightly. "That man's a nuisance. Comes in here weekly with new sightings and demands I organize a posse. Claims she's hiding with Apaches, plotting attacks. And you believe him?" "I believe he's a bitter man who lost a bounty and can't let it go." Morrison leaned back. "But I'll admit, I'm curious about what really happened. The stories are so varied, everything from a feral child to a witch who commanded wolf armies." Luke smiled. "The truth," Sheriff is usually simpler than the stories. There was a girl, traumatized and living rough. She's gone now, found peace. I hope. But men like Cray can't accept that some stories don't end with violence. Morrison studied him. You helped her, didn't you? That's what Cooper's notes say. I did what any Christian man should do, showed mercy to someone in need. And where's she now? Luke met his gaze steadily. Gone, far from here. Somewhere she can't hurt anyone or be hurt. That's all anyone needs to know. The sheriff nodded slowly. I'm inclined to agree, but Cray's persistent, and he's got a few others listening. I can't stop him from searching on his own. What if, Luke said carefully, you had proof the wolf girl was gone? Something to show Cray and end this once and for all. That evening, Luke returned to the hotel to find Ayanna treating a woman's sprained wrist. Word of a skilled healer had spread quickly, and several people waited to see her. She worked with quiet confidence. Her remedy bag, a gift from her aunt, open beside her. My wife, Luke explained to Morrison, who'd accompanied him. She has some medical training. Morrison watched Ayanna work, noting her gentleness, her proper speech, carefully practiced, her obvious skill. Ma'am, he said when the last patient left, your husband says you might have information about the wolf girl. Ayanna looked up, her face calm. I knew her. Yes, briefly. She told a carefully crafted story, meeting a wild, frightened girl in the desert, helping her find distant relatives who took her in, watching her leave for Mexico where she could start fresh. It was close enough to truth to be believable, far enough to protect the village. She was just a broken child who needed kindness. Ayanna concluded, I hope she found peace. Morrison seemed satisfied, but as they walked back to his office, Cray emerged from the saloon, his eyes locked on Ayanna, and something flickered there, not quite recognition, but suspicion. Well, he drawled. The helpful Mr. Garrett returns, and with a pretty Apache wife. How interesting. Is there a problem, Mr. Cray? Morrison's voice carried authority. No problem, Sheriff. Just admiring Garrett's taste in women. His smile was cold. She reminds me of someone. Luke stepped forward, hand near his gun. You'll speak respectfully to my wife, or we'll have words. Peace, gentlemen, Morrison intervened. Mr. Cray, I've heard enough of your wolf girl theories. Mrs. Garrett has provided credible information that the girl left for Mexico months ago. The matter is closed. Cray's face darkened. You taking the word of an Indian over, I'm taking the word of a respectable woman over a man who's been drinking since noon. Morrison cut him off. Go home, Cray, sleep it off. They watched Cray stumble away, but Luke knew this wasn't over. Men like him didn't give up easily. That night, as they lay in the hotel bed, Ayanna was quiet. He suspects, she said finally, but can't prove anything, and Morrison's on our side. For now. She turned to face him. Luke, I won't live in fear again. If we must face him, then we face him together. Luke finished. Always together. The confrontation came 2 days later. They were preparing to leave, their mission complete, when Cray and 3 men blocked their path. But this time, the town's response was different. Mrs. Garrett had treated a dozen people, shown nothing but kindness. When Cray started ranting about wolf girls and savages, the townspeople weren't listening. Enough! Mayor Hutchins himself intervened. Sam Cray, you're disturbing the peace. These are respectable folks who've done nothing but help our community. Let them pass. Faced with the town's opposition, Cray had no choice but to step aside. As their wagon rolled past, he locked eyes with Ayanna one last time. I know what you are, he hissed. She met his gaze steadily. Yes, she said quietly, so only he could hear. I am a woman who survived, a healer, a wife, a human being. That is all I am, and all I need to be. They left Willow Creek behind. The ghost of the wolf girl finally laid to rest. As they traveled back to the hidden valley, Ayanna felt the last chains of her past fall away. You were magnificent, Luke told her, facing them like that. We were magnificent, she corrected. The reckless cowboy and his wild wife, writing their story together. The valley welcomed them home with celebration. The threat had passed, the secret held. As spring arrived, bringing the promised rains, their child was born, a daughter with her mother's dark eyes and her father's smile. They named her Hope, for that's what she represented. Not just for them, but for all people caught between worlds, searching for where they belonged. Years later, when Hope was old enough to understand, they would tell her the whole story, about wolves and humanity, about choosing love over fear, about the kiss that brought not just one soul back from the wilderness, but two. And in the telling, the truth would shine through, that love transcends all boundaries, that humanity lives in our choices, not our circumstances, and that sometimes the wildest hearts make the strongest homes. The desert bloomed around them, harsh and beautiful, holding their secrets and their joy. The wolves still sang in the distant hills, and sometimes Ayanna would pause in her work to listen, remembering, but she no longer yearned to run with them. She had found her pack, her place, her purpose, home. It turned out, wasn't a single world to choose, but the bridge built between many worlds, strong enough to hold a family, a future, and all the love two hearts could hold. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey through the Wild West, where love conquered the impossible divide between civilization and wilderness. If you're listening to this story, I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. Please leave a comment below and let's connect across the miles, just as Luke and Ayanna connected across their different worlds. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more tales of courage, romance, and redemption from the American frontier. Share your thoughts about Luke and Ayanna's story. Did their love touch your heart as it touched mine? Until we meet again on the dusty trails of imagination, keep believing in the power of love to transform even the wildest of hearts.